Okay. Good morning. I believe we are on Daf Memches Amud Aleph, learning as a schus for Shlema Feilan Chaya Baserach. So on the top of the Amud, we had learned that the source for the requirement of tzafin by a carbon oila. We said v'minatzayin vav moisefel in rishon shachar isal yerech hamizbeach tzafayna. It says by oila. If you remember on the top of the Amud, it says literally that you should do it by the side of the mizbeach on the north side. That's the source. When we're going through a lot of different karbanos where the source is all the kachim, where do we know that they have to be done on the north side? But I believe the only place that the Torah actually says it is by the oila. All the other ones are going to be by comparison to oila. So we saw that it says it by oila, that it says direct. The Torah says directly it needs to be bitzah. So now the Gemara is asking, chatas minalan. How do we know by the chatas as well that the chatas has to be, it has to be shechted on the side, on the northern side of the mizbech. So we're going to see there are 4 different places where the pasuk tells us that the chatas has to be brought, has to be shechted in the same place as the oila. So all of the chatas rayas are going to be next to they're going to be coming from oila. So first it says that the chsev v'shachar is a chatas v'mkayim oila, that you should shech the chatas in the place of the oila. The samach is yada aroish chatas shachar is a chatas v'mkayim oila. Ashkan shchita. Kabbalah minal. That tells you the shechita has to be on the side. Kabbalah, where do we know that the Kabbalah as well has to be there? The chsev v'lakach hakayan midam hachatas. Mekabel atz, v'lakach hakayan midam hachatas. What does it have to say? So we darshan it v'lakach hakayan midam. That he has to take midam hachatas. That he has to take it. He's taking it in the place where the chatas was shechted, which is again on the north. Mekabel atzma minalan. Where do we know that it's not just that he had that the chiyuv for the kohen to be mekabel adam is on the north, but that the kohen himself who's being mekabel adam has to be in the north? If you remember, we had Gemaras earlier suggesting, by the carbon we allow someone who's, for example, limits someone who's tameh, he could stick in a long knife and shech from outside of the azara. So maybe you could have the same thing with kibul dam. Maybe the kohen could be standing outside of the north side and stick his hand into the north side and be makabel adam there. Amar krav v'lokach, which we darshan lo yikach. It should be taken to him. He should be also in the north as well, in the tzafin as well. Okay, so all of these psukim are telling you that it said v'shachat is achatas b'koyim ha'oila, and instead of saying it says that instead of v'shachat it says the chatas. This is coming to tell you that anything that's called a chatas needs tzafin. So zok the Gemara ashkan mitzvah. So we learned that there's there's a mitzvah that the Torah tells you that you should shech the chatas on the tzafin. But as we know, the rule is in kachim, you always need shana alav hakasav la'akav. We don't take things on trust when it comes to kachim. We need Torah to say it twice in order for it to be required, for it to be ma'akav, for it to be that if you don't do it, it's going to be possible. That's a general rule. We've seen it many, many times. If the Torah just tells you to do something once in kachim, it just means that ideally you should do it that way. But if you don't do it, it's still kosher. So, but the Gemara is saying that. But we know that shechita b'tzafin is ma'akav. So where do we know that from? So Gemara krachim yiksev. We have another pasuk. V'shachat oisei b'mkoyim asher yishchat es ha'olam. So the first pasuk was about a general chatas. This pasuk is by a chatas that is brought by the nasi, seir nasi. which has a special din. You got the wrong one. The Gemara. It says by the seer Nasi. If you remember the Nasi who is over on an Avera, he has to bring a special chatas, a soir, a male goat. And it says by him, it says about him as well that he should shecht it in the place where you shecht the oil. So far we've seen two psukim that say by a chatas that it should be in the makam oil. We have in the general din of a chatas, the Torah says, and that's what we learn the mitzvah. And we're saying that which it says by the soir nasi, it says the same thing. Now we already learned by the general pasuk that all of the chatoyis are supposed to be b'tzafin. So what does the Torah have to tell you again by the soir nasi that it needs to be b'tzafin, that it has to be m'koyim asher shachar hesa'olah? So it's coming to tell you la'akav. So the Tanya heichen oila nishchata b'tzafin. Afzeh b'tzafin. We learned in the Brisa that tells you that the soir nasi is also b'tzafin. We were, like we said in Amid Aleph, we have the basic pasuk that tells you that chatas is b'tzafin like the oila. So what do you need to say it again by the soir nasi? I'm sorry. So that's what it's coming to tell you before. That's a kasha. So this is coming to tell you that it's ma'akav. So tomorrow. All right. So this is the text. It's coming to tell you that shchita b'tzafin for chatoyis is la'akav. In fact, the Gemara So again, I'll just catch everyone up. Let me quickly start from the beginning because I know this is very confusing. We had said on the beginning on Amud Aleph, first we learned out that an oila needs to be b'tzafin. The shechita of an oila has to be b'tzafin. Now we're asking, where do we know chatas needs to be b'tzafin? The shechita has to be b'tzafin. So we said we have a pasuk that says that the chatas generally chatois have to be in the same place as the oila. So that tells you it has to be b'tzafin. In fact, the Gemara, you always need shana lav la'akev. So how do you know it's ma'akev? So the Gemara is saying we see. It says by soir nasi also that it should be the same place as the oila, so that's a shana lav la'akav. The Gemara, the Gemara says now that how do you know that this is shana lav la'akav? Maybe what the pasuk is telling you by soir nasi is to saying only a soir nasi needs tzafin from chatais, but the other chatais don't need it. Talmud loyim of a shachar is a chatas b'mukayim oila. So we have a shachar that's a chatas to tell you that all the chatois need tzaf. Ashkan soir nasi bein lemitzvah bein la'akev. Shar chatois nami ashkan lemitzvah. So at this point, so we based on this question that we asked, so it's only telling you that the soir nasi needs it. So we're saying, no, we already have another pasuk that tells you for all chatais that you need it. So maybe this is only telling you la'akav by the soir nasi. It says, the Torah says it not just once by a general chatas. It also says once by a sheep, by a chatas brought from a sheep, and one brought from a female sheep and one brought from a female goat. So that tells you that for the fact that it was doubled, that's shana lav la'akav. Now the Gemara asks, before it asked, it says, that kasha when it asked before that maybe it's only by the soir nasi, that's from the lashon of the pasuk that it says oisai, v'shachat oisai. So we say that means only it, maybe only the soir nasi should be brought. So we know what we're asking now, but now l'maisa we've learned from the psukim that that's not the case. That the soir nasi together with all of the other karbanis are both required to be b'tzafin, and it's shana lov la'akim. So what do you do with this pasuk oisei that it says by the sar nasi? We need it like it says in the Brisa, oisei b'tzafin be'ein soyer nachshon b'tzafin. This that we say a chatas needs to be b'tzafin is only the typical chatayis that we discuss, right? We have the chatayis pnimius and the chatayis chitzonius, all the different chatayis. But the soyer nachshon, that was a one-time thing that the Torah said that by the chinuch of the Mishkan, all the Nesiim brought their own karbanos. And so the example of that, the first one is the soyer from Nachshon, from Shevi Yehuda. He brought the first carbon. So we call those the soyer Nachshon, those one-time seirim. So it's coming to tell you only the chatois for the dairis, the regular chatois need soften, but the soyer that was brought in the Mishkan by the Chinuch HaMishkan did not need soften. The Tanya, v'samach yadai, v'samach yadai al reish hasoyer l'rabi soyer nachshon l'smicha. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. The Torah says you need smicha, and that's telling you even the soyer nachshon needs smicha. It's coming to be marba, even the seirim, but it doesn't mean the seirah of nachshon. It's talking about the seirah of avodas kechavim that they need smicha. So sakadei chamina hayel v'israbi l'smicha. Israbi namel itzafin. That's why we need a pasuk to be memayit soyer nachshon from tzafin, because since soyer nachshon has smicha, maybe it also has tzafin kamash malon. That's what Isa is telling you. No, that there's no din of tzafin on the soyer nachshon. Mashkuf la Ravina, Hanu Rabbi Yehuda. That works according to Rabbi Yehuda, Hutaka says. So that's why you need Isa to tell you tzafin by Sar Nachshon, because it already is misraba for smicha. Maybe it's also misraba for tzafin. L'Rav Shimon Ma'ikal Ameima, Amalei Mazut Rabbeinu Rav Tevi l'Ravina, or Rav Yehuda Minicha. Is it any better according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says that it's coming to tell you smicha? L'maydis Rabbi is Rabbi, L'maydis lo is Rabbi, lo is Rabbi. Why would you say because the Sar Nachshon is included for smicha, it should also be included for tzafin, for the parts that the Torah has told you that it has a din smicha, that's what it has a din, and for the things that it wasn't included, it wasn't. So you don't need a pasuk to exclude the Sar Nachshon from tzafin. And if you'll say that no, if the pasuk wouldn't have told you, then I would learn it out, just like we see by tzafin that it had legabi. I'm sorry, that the Sar Nachshon requires smicha. So I'll say a binyanav, so it should also require tzafin. Imkain smicha gufa teisi binyanav. So saying no, we're learning it out as a binyanav from the other chatais, not just from Sar Nachshon. We're going to learn out from. We're not going to learn out tzafin of Sar Nachshon from smicha of Sar Nachshon, but we're learning out of binyanav from all the other karbanos that would normally. All the other chatayis need tzafin, so this Sar Nachshon should ostensibly also require tzafin the same way as all the other ones do. So in case smicha gufa teisei binyav, then what do we need a pasuk for smicha? Ella midaris lo gamrin. The reason why you can't learn out from the regular chatayis is because you can't learn out the Sar Nachshon, the dinah of the chatas that was brought by Nachshon can't be learned out from a typical chatas which is always brought. So you can't say a binyanav also legabi the din suffer. So we're still back to what do you do with ice? So therefore that's why we needed ice. So the Gemara says, well, maybe I'll tell you a different reason of what we're going to do with ice. Maybe ice is telling you that only the chatas has to be the carbon itself, the animal has to be b'tzafin, but the sheichet, the one who's shechting it, doesn't need to be b'tzafin. He could do it from outside. So Zak the Gemara, we already saw this back on Amid Aleph. Sheichet mi'urachya nafki, the Tanya rachya omer. The sheichet ois al yeracham is be'ech tzafayna. Mal talmud loimer. What does the Torah have to tell you? L'fisha matzinu omer b'tzafin b'kabel b'tzafin. V'im amer b'dar mekil b'tzafin Puzzle. Yachal av zaken. I would say just like legabi Kabbalah, like we learned out before, that it has to be both the kli as well as the kayin who's being mekabel. They both have to be b'tzafin. Maybe legabi shchita, that's also true. Tamalema oisei b'tzafin ve'ena sheichet b'tzafin. There's no requirement that the sheichet be in the tzafin. He can have a long knife. He could be in Tel Aviv. If you could figure out, maybe I guess he could do they do remote control surgery. Maybe you could have, I don't know if that's yetsu with that, but if you could do a remote controlled, but if he has, let's say, a mile long knife, he could be far away and do the shchita without being b'tzafin. So, tamalama oisa b'tzafin ve'ena sheichet b'tzafin. Ella oisa b'tzafin ve'ein bena. Zaknamara. Okay, so it seems like so right. So we're asking. We see this from Reb Achia. So Dr. Gemara. So what do we need? So we're asking. So what do we need oisa for? We already learned it out. So we learned that from Reb Achia. Ella oisa b'tzafin ve'ein ben oif b'tzafin. We learn it out. We use oisa b'tzafin to tell you that when you bring a chatas. That like a oil of a yared that could bring from a bird, then you don't need that the malika should be b'tzafin. The tanya yachli ben oif time safin. Maybe a ben oif just when you bring a chatas from a bird, just like when you shecht an animal, you have to do the shchita b'tzafin. Maybe a bird should be the same thing. V'dinu ma ben sa'ishalei kavalei kayin kavalei tzafin. If shchita of a sheep, which is just an example of an animal, where there's no requirement, it could even be done by a zar. It still has to be in the north. Ben oif shekavalei kayin, malika can only be done by a kayin. Ein adin sheyikvalei tzafin. I would think certainly it has to be b'tzafin. Tamid lama oisa. So that's what we need oisa for. So Gemara mala ben seichein kavalei kli. No, you can't compare them. When you shecht a tzayin, it always has to go into a kli. It needs to go into kli sharis. So maybe that's the reason why it has to be b'tzafin. But I wouldn't think that teaches you by an oif, because an oif can be done when you do malika. Then the blood comes out of the neck of the bird, and you take the bird and you apply it directly to the mizbeach. There's no klisharis. Ella. So again, we're still stuck with what are we doing with oisei? Ella oisei b'tzafin ve'in pesach b'tzafin. Torah says oisei that the carbon should be b'tzafin. The chat should be b'tzafin, but a Pesach doesn't need to be shechted in the north. The Tanya, Elazar ben Yaakov Aimer, Yachli a Pesach to in tzafin v'dinu. Ma oila shechein like kavalei zman l'shchitase kavalei tzafin, like we saw in Amud Aleph. The oila has to be, that's the original source that kachi kachim has to be b'tzafin, and oila there's no specific time for it. Pesach shekavalei zman, Pesach that it can only be brought in our Pesach l'shchitase ein adin shekavalei tzafin. Certainly, it should need tzafin. Tamalema oisei. So Gemara, no, you can't learn that out. Malo oila shechein kol. The oila has a chumrah that it's kol, it's fully burnt off. Pesach is not, so maybe that's the reason why it needs tzafin. So Gemara says, okay, we'll learn out Pesach instead of learning out from oila, we'll learn out from chatas. Malo chatas shechein mechaperes al chavi krisis. They say no, chatas has a chumrah. Again, chatas is not kavul leizman, so you should be able to make the same kavachayim. Where it says no, you also can learn out from Pesach from chatas, because it's mechaper on when someone does a chayve krisis. Pesach is not mechaper on anything. So Gemara, so let's learn out from Asham. Mala Asham. So I'll tell you an answer for Asham why you can't learn out Pesach from Asham. Shechein kachei kachim. And Mikulan Nami shechein kachei kachim. The Gemara now goes back and says, oh, Oila, Chatas, Asham. He could have said this from the beginning. And to be honest, that's the first thing that occurred to me when we saw it. Why are you asking Kasha to learn out kachim kalim? But like we started with Pesach that should have tzafin. Our Mishnah said only kachei kachim have tzafin. So why are you asking? It seems the answer is pretty obvious. That's the way the Mishnah was machalik already. So Dr. Mara, so we still, what is oisei for? Dr. Mara, kadamar meikara, oisei b'tzafin, bein shaycha b'tzafin. We said, it's telling you that only the animal has to be b'tzafin, but not the person who shechs. Or the kashalach med Reb Achia, you asked that we learned it out from Reb Achia. Nafkalon When we're saying it's not to tell you that the person shechting the carbon does not need Ritzafim. Because Taka, we know that from Zevachim. It's coming to tell you by Yechatas that the sheikhet doesn't have to be B'tzafin to the exclusion of the Makabel, the person the Kohen who's holding the dam. In fact, the Gemara, that's what Oisei is telling you. In fact, the Gemara, Makabel milakach lo yikach, like we said on Amud Aleph. It says also over here, Lashon lakach, just like we said before, that tells you that the Makabel, that he should take it, that the Kohen has to take it. So that's telling you he also has to be B'tzafin. So he doesn't hold of this drasha, and therefore he uses Oisei for this purpose. Okay. Ashkechan shchita ba'oila lemitzvah kabbalah. So we just went through chatas, right? On Amud Aleph we saw oila. We just saw a pasuk about oila, and then we had this whole Gemara about chatas bein lemitzvah bein la'akev. But now the Gemara is going to have to circle back to oila. By oila we just had one pasuk. So one pasuk we know is only the mitzvah. It's not la'akev. We always need shana la'akasav la'akev. So now we got to go back to oila. Ashchan shchita ba'oila lemitzvah. We know that the shchitas oila b'tzafin is the Torah says you should do it. Kabbalah nami lemitzvah. Ashkechan. We also have that the Kabbalah should be done in the tzafin. Shchita b'gol la'akav minolim. But how do you know by oila that it's ma'akav? So this is the reason why the Gemara skipped over saying the ikuv by oila and said the whole din of chatas, because the Gemara says it's a kal v'chaymer umach chatas that we just learned out haba mikayach oila. Like we said at the beginning, the Torah only says one time it should be you should do shchita by the north of the mizbeach. It says it by oila, and then everything by chatas is v'shachad achatas b'mkayim asher shachad asayla, right? Or it says four different psukim that say essentially, I think, but it never says directly to do it on the north. It just says you do it in the same place as the oila. So where it says it's a kal v'chaymer. We just had this whole amud that told you that a chatas is not just lemitzvah; it's also la'akev, and the Torah never said directly the makom of the chatas. It was just learned out from the oila. So if it's ma'aka by the chatas, oila chatas mikaycha, the oila that the chatas being learned out from, and it didn't shemakaves. It says no. How can you make a kal v'chaymer? It has a kula that the chatas is mechaper is a brought as a kapara for chayvik krisis, and the oila is for mitzvah sasei. Ravina. Rav Ada bar Ahava had this question, and he said, "This is not a kal v'chaymer per se. We're not saying that because it has a chumrah. Oila has a chumrah that it was learned out from there. Masha ein kein chatas was only learned out from oila. He's saying klum matzinu tafel chum neikar. It's not a kal v'chaymer. It's just how could you learn out chatas from oila, and chatas will have a more chamadik din. If you only learned it out from oila, how is it possible for chatas, which is learned out from oila, to end up being more chamer than oila? Be that it's not just a mitzvah. Chatas is both la'akav, and oila is only going to be la mitzvah, but you only learned out chatas and oila. It doesn't make sense. It's not. It's sort of like dialovim and adin, but he's saying it's not a kal v'chaymer. It's saying this is the source. So you can't say that what you're learning out has something that comes from something else should be more chum. As you're going to see, there's a reason why I'm insisting on that formulation, because the Gemara is going to ask now. The Gemara is going to try to bring a bunch of examples. Well, you have something that comes from something else that it's more chum. The Gemara, Bare Meiser. The din of Meiser is Meiser Sheni. When someone separates a tenth of his field, of his produce that he has to take to Yerushalayim, the Torah says it could be paid it. The din of meiser is if it becomes tamei, you can't eat it. You have to be paid it, and then eat the new what you paid it with. So, and also the din of meiser. Another thing you should know is meiser could only be padui one time. It means if you took meiser and used it to buy, you used it you put it onto money, and then you use that money, you go to Yerushalayim, and then you buy food. That's the end of the line. You can't then sell that food a second time. You can't be paid it a second time. There's only one chance to be paid. Okay, so Maisa, the Hu Nifta, the original Maisa Sheni can be paid. V'ilul akuch bekasef Maisa, if he was paid it and then he bought Maisa, ain't Nifta. You can't be paid that anymore. The Tnan. And how do I know this? Halakuch bekasef Maisa, when someone came to Yerushalayim with his money that he had been paid his original Maisa, now he took his money there. Shenit, it became, then he bought with himself some pizza to eat in Yerushalayim, and it became Tamei Yifta. You say he can be paid. Yehuda Aime Yikava. Yehuda says no, he has to bury it. He can't be paid it because because he says that there's no possibility of pedia on this which was bought in its that was padi in the place of the first one. So for the Gemara, how can it be that this second pigeon is stronger than the lekuach b'kasef ma'aser is stronger than the original ma'aser? The original ma'aser was able to be padi, and then what's bought with it is not able to be padi. How can it be that the tafel is chamam and ikar? So that's a kasha on what we had said. So the Gemara, hasam le'alim kedusha le'mitvis pidjina. He says no, it's not a chumrah. It's not a strength of the padua of the lekuach b'kasef ma'aser. I'm not saying it's stronger than the original ma'aser. We're saying it's the other way around. You can't be paid because it's not as strong. The original ma'aser had enough kedusha that it could go into its what was bought in its place. It means the original ma'aser is very strong. So when you are paid it, the kedusha goes into that money, and then you can bring it to Yerushalayim. But once you already get that you took that money and you bought new parish with it, that's not as strong a kedusha on the second level that it could go into the pigeon. So it's not a chumrah of the second one, after you paid it, that it can't be padi, but rather it's a weakness of its kedusha. So that is not a kasha on the rule that we never find a tafel chamam and ikar, because this is really a chumrah of the ikar, not of the tafel. Frankly, the din of tmura is that when a person when he has a carbon and he then exchanges it for a different carbon, both of them become kaddish. The rule is, if someone just tries to be mekadesh balmum, the kedushas, there's no kedushas haguf that's chal on the attempted that which he was trying to be makdash the animal. It only becomes a kedushas damim. It's not able to be chal. But by tmura, when someone tries to make a tmura on an animal that's a balmum, it is chal on the tmura. Now, a tmura is only coming mikayach the original animal that was makdish. So we're saying it can't be chal a kedushas haguf when from chulin when you're trying to make it into kachim. So why is it that tmura, which is only coming mikayach the original kedusha, it is chal? So Gemara, tmura mikayach kachim ka'asya, but kachim mikayach chulin ka'asya. Where it says, how could you compare? The tmura, there's already a kedusha saguf in the animal, so you're taking from something that has a kedusha saguf and you're applying it to a second animal. But by chul, when you're being mekadesh the animal in the first place, you're taking something that's chulin and trying to make it kachim. That you don't have the ability to do on something that's a balmum. So that also is not a kasha on this cloud. A third kasha, Hari Pesach. The carbon Pesach, the hu ein eton smicha. When you bring the carbon Pesach, there's no need for smicha or nechasim or tnufa chasim shaykh. It doesn't need any of these three things. It doesn't need the poured out wine, and it doesn't need the waving of the chaz and shaykh of the different limbs. If someone has a Pesach after Pesach is over, after Yudal B'Nisan, we learned that it gets treated as a shlamim, and then a shlamim is turned to michan chasim tun for chazav shaykh. So how can something that was originally a Pesach and it came mikayach a Pesach itself doesn't need tun for chazav shaykh, and now it's coming from the tafel to the Pesach, the shlamim from the leftover does have a din tun for chazav shaykh. How could you have the tafel chamim and ikka? So Gemara Pesach b'shayim ha'isashon shlamim bu. Gemara says no, that's not a kasha. It's not that it's a Pesach, it's a tafel to the Pesach. The Torah says that it changes its nature. It originally was a Pesach, now it's a shlamim. Shlamim has a different nature than Pesach. In some ways it's more chamer, but that was the Torah's gzeira that it switches to become shlamim. Now the Gemara goes all the way back to the original question of where do we know that you need, right? So this is all we said, ein a tafel chamim ne'ikar, to tell you that by Oyla, Safan is Ma'akav, because we learn out Chatas from Oyla, and Chatas is Ma'akav. Now the Gemara is going to say another way that we know, another possibility of how we know that Oyla is Ma'akav. You say, Ha'Oyla b'mkay matahei. The Torah says the second pasuk, Ha'Oyla, that's also a riboy, that's a second Shana of La'akav to tell you that it has to be B'tzafan, and therefore it's Ma'akav. Okay, that's the end of Oyla. So First, we learned the basic din of Oyla. Then we learned the whole din of Chatas, both the mitzvah and la'akav. And now we've just gone back and we learned that Oyla is also ma'akav. Now we're going to start with Asham. So come on, Asham minal in the boy tzafin. Where do we know that Asham needs tzafin? Again, the Torah does not say directly tzafin. We learn it out from its comparison to Oyla. Ashkan shchita. That tells shchita kabbalah minalan. How do you know Kabbalah? Torah says, "Ve'es damai yizrak." Kibul damai namin b'tzafin. So it says, "Ve'es damai yizrak," for the fact that Torah says, and as well it's damai. So you say you dash in the ve'es damai at the end of the original pasuk. It says, "B'kamish yishchut tza'ila yishchut is awesome ve'es damai," and the dam also has to be b'tzafin. Makabel atzmui minal. And how do you know that the kohen who's being makabel the dam in the klisharis that he also has to be in the north? Damai ve'es damai. It could have said ve'damai. Instead it's ve'es damai. So that's an extra word to tell you that the makabel also has to be there. Ashkan lemitzvah la'akamin. So we know that one should do it b'tzafin. How do we know the shana love la'akav? So we have another pasuk. This is written legabe the asham mitzaira, which is a specific kind of asham. It says on it v'shachar as a kasef. It says b'mkoyim asher yishchat. There's a long pasuk. B'mkoyim asher yishchat es achatas es oila b'mkoyim hakodesh ki chatas kashim. Praktimar v'hayla hachiyudah says that pasuk really telling you this. Hami b'lechatanya davar shayi b'chlal v'yatzalim b'davar chadash yatzur shayi lachzir l'ka achi yachzira ha'kasab l'klali. That the Torah had given a klal. Okay, I'm going to try to quickly finish up. That we said that the asham mitzaira, we said the din of the regular asham, and now we say the din of the asham mitzaira. Why is the Torah telling you all the rules of the asham mitzaira? So because we have a rule that when you have different rule, when you have a general rule, and then you have different rules for one item, you're not going to have any of the din of the general until the Torah says that it's the same. Ketzad. So one example, if like we just quoted in that pasuk, what does it have to say that the asham is like the kechatas asham? The asham is like the chatas. The asham mitzvah is different than all the other ashamas that you have to put the blood on the thumb and the large toe of the mitzvah. Yamanis on his right ear. Maybe it's not going to be like the other ashamas to need the matan dam and the gabi mizbech. So we'll say the same thing. Since just like you said, that the mitzvah is different from other hashamas, and we need a pasuk to tell you that needs matan dam ve'imrum legabe mizbeach, you need to do the zrikas dam, you need everything else. Maybe you also need a pasuk to tell you tzofen, because it was different. It was lidin b'davar chadash, that it needs matan dam ve'imrum, that it needs bayin yad, that it needs had these sessions. In kein nichta b'hai v'le nichta b'hai. Oh, you know, we're gonna have to stop here. It's. I have to stick to my rule. I can't go past 7:10. As much as I wanted to finish this.